Well, I guess we'll get started. First of all, welcome to the strangest quarterly board meeting for the Albany Pine Bush Commission, I think probably in history, certainly in my history. But it's good to see faces after essentially being a hermit for the last 3 months. I'm going to go around and introduce people like I normally would if we were all here. If I miss somebody, I apologize and certainly let me know. Obviously, Executive Director.
Excuse me, Keith,
Yeah.
Could you call the meeting to order too, please? Do you do that before you introduce or after?
I'm not sure. Usually I just
Order, and then we can do introductions.
I put it at 9:36, if that's okay, when you started talking.
Okay. So obviously, Chris Harvard, Executive Director, is here. I heard John Brust, Citizen Rep. I saw Nancy Pearson, Citizen Rep. Steve Rice, Citizen Rep, is here. Jessica Otney from the Nature Conservancy is here. Elaine Chinian is from the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation is here. And representing Colony is Supervisor Paula Mahan, as well as Mike Tengler. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah, Brad Glass, City of Albany.
Oh, sorry, Brad.
And Mike McLaughlin from the County Exec's Office is here.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Mike McLaughlin from the County Exec's Office is here. Keith.
Hi, Mike. I'm new to Zoom, so I apologize. I see you guys now. I didn't see you before.
We're all new to a lot of things these days, as a matter of fact, I think.
So, all right, welcome everybody. The first order of business is to consider the minutes from the last meeting, which was roughly 6 months ago in December. So can I have a motion for someone to consider the minutes?
I will. Frost will.
Thanks, John. Second?
McLaughlin.
Elaine.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Was that Elaine that seconded it?
Yes.
Thank you.
So normally the next thing we do is open it up for comments from the public. Chris, the public isn't on this, are they?
They're welcome to be.
Okay, so if there's anyone from the public who wishes to make any announcements, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there is anybody, Keith.
Okay.
Just staff.
Okay, so we'll continue and move on to reports. I don't really have a lot to report other than, you know, the agency's been busy with reopening in accordance with directions from the governor's office. I've been working closely with Chris as he develops his own opening plan for the Pine Bush as well. But that clearly is taking front and center in most of our time. So I don't have anything else to report other than that we've been focused on the reopening due to COVID-19. So now I'd like to open it up to any of the other board members. If you have any things you'd like to bring up to the group, any comments, any thoughts? Okay, so Chris, I give it over to you.
Sure. I'll take this down for a minute, take the agenda down. Just kind of an update of, there's a full update well, there was an update in March from what we were doing between December and March. We didn't have that meeting. And then there's an update between March and June. So basically, our offices, like most places, more or less shut down, and everybody started to work remotely around the 16th of March. We did bring field staff back in starting in early May to do some scientific field work, but also primarily to get people out there to maintain our trail system, because as you probably can imagine, the 20 plus miles of trails that the Pine Bush has is seeing lots and lots and lots of use. So we've been taking care of that. We, as an organization, functioned, I would say, incredibly well remotely and communicating consistently through Zoom and other phone and telephone conferences. So like Keith said, for the last several weeks, we've been working on a reopening plan. I've been following what DEC's been doing, and we have Did you mute that? Sorry. So you have to have a sense of humor in Zoom, right? So we've been working on a reopening plan. We put together a return to work team. It's one of those things that's been recommended by the state and other local agencies like the Chamber. So we have Aaron Keinel, who's been filling in for Blake Etchison, who's out on maternity leave. For the facility, we have Patty McLaughlin as our office manager, and Lisa, our director of finance and ops. So the four of us have been working for several weeks on a reopening plan and getting the building and the office prepared. So we will be reopening office and field work officially on Monday, the 22nd, which is great. I mean, there's been a lot of effort that's been put into this, obviously. We've got lots of hand sanitizing stations. We've got a lot of signage directing people how to appropriately socially distance, all the things that you can imagine. And if anybody wants a copy of our reopening plan, send me an email. I'll be happy to send it to you. It's ours is only 7 pages as opposed to DEC's. I think Keith's is like, I don't know, 21, something like that. And I don't think I'll go into too much detail. I'd like you to take a look at the update, the things that staff have been doing remotely. One of the interesting things I will add is, so Lupin Fest this year, obviously we couldn't have Lupin Fest, which has drawn close to 2,000 people in the past. So the Lupin Fest committee decided to do a virtual Lupin Fest. So there were different activities every day the week it started. We launched it on Monday, Memorial Day. So that whole week we had activities for things for people to do. People were recording observations throughout the spring on the iNaturalist app, which we use quite a bit, which is pretty cool. And I just asked Wendy for some numbers. So basically, as far as reach, as in the number of people who saw our posts at least once for that week, was over 238,000. And post engagements, which is the total number of actions that people took involving our posts, so they saw a post and they did something, was surpassed 42,000. So a lot of people were online, obviously, in late May. And I guess I'll leave it at that, except for I will say that right before the shutdown, we actually did burn. It was the earliest we've ever burned in the preserve going back to 1991. And we burned 3 units, 67 acres. So we'll be seeing how things continue along with the burn season and where the state lands with approvals for prescribed fire as we continue. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Chris, I have a question with regards to public use of Pine Bush lands. I know in the case of the state lands, we were inundated with people just itching to get out of the house. And I was wondering if you experienced the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. Like lots and lots of users, particularly here at the Discovery Center. Oh, and I forgot about the Discovery Center. I'll go back to that for our reopening. The Discovery Center on weekends, parking lots are full. But most of the time, people were really respectful of others. So if the parking lot was full, Jessica, you know, because you came here, other staff have been here. If the parking lot was full, they'd turn around, they'd go to another place. And it's been, the reports that come through have been very interesting about how respectful people are being, which is really nice to hear. We have, Wendy created a trail report. So that's on our website. So anybody who's out in the preserve, they could submit a trail report, like I saw a tree down, or I saw 3 deer, or any of that. So we've been getting a lot of those reports. So just to back up, so our reopening plan is just for the offices and just for field work. The Discovery Center is going to fall somewhere, it's going to fall in phase 4, and what that looks like is kind of yet to be seen. So we'll continue to be working on that. And I'll continue to be in communication with Keith to see how 5 Rivers is going to approach this. And Elaine, I'd be interested to see how like Emma Treadwell is going to be approaching things up at Thatcher too. So.
Chris, I'm happy to report that Albany County has received no complaints about the Albany pine bush. And I can tell you that we've received plenty of complaints about other things.
Really? Other open space areas?
Oh yeah. Most notably county resources. So yes.
Thanks, Mike. That's good to hear. I appreciate that. Okay. So we have the technical committee report.
Oops. Chris, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
It's just, I'm out of the state budget. I know a lot of you are involved and have a lot of knowledge. Can you just update me on where we stand in terms of the state allocation? If you're getting back to it later this meeting, that's fine too. But I'd like to get a little bit of a sense for where you stand.
I can tell you where we stand right now, and Jessica, if you want to add anything. So for this fiscal year, we get an advance that starts the first quarter. So first quarter started April 1st. So we submitted that advance to DEC April 16th, and we hadn't gotten that advance yet. And I do know that funding and cash flow within not just DEC, but state agencies overall is really tight, obviously. I guess the good thing is we already have a contract in place, so that's helpful. And the legislature and governor signed off on the EPF this year, so it is appropriated. With that said, we're going to spend very cautiously. So we have an approved budget we approved in December, starting April 1st. We're basically not spending anything large until I get some indication that money's coming through. So we're paying staff benefits, basic things specifically relating to safety and things like that for COVID-19 for the office and for staff. But big contracts, I'm going to sit on those. Seasonals only if we really need them. And that's pretty much what other state agencies have been doing. So it's basically we have this approved budget. And usually once the budget's approved, I hand it over to the department directors and say, okay, it's your budget. You can spend it now that it's approved. At this point, every expense has to be approved by me. So we're taking it slow. And we have reserves. Like when we worked with the Nature Conservancy and they were our fiscal agent, TNC would go a year without getting reimbursed, and then they'd get reimbursed. We may see that, and we have the reserves to do that, fortunately, but I'm not going to spend a full budget without some assurance that cash is going to flow. So anything to add, Jess?
Because I think you're approaching that really in a wise way. And I will say from the not-for-profit side, with organizations dealing with similar state funding sources, we are already seeing issues with delays in grants moving. And obviously the state is hesitating to initiate new contracts. So I think the caution that you're using to manage the commission is very smart at this point. I don't think the state understands the full ramifications yet of the COVID crisis on the state budget, and certainly all eyes are on Washington to take action. We don't know if or when that will happen, and the state has already initiated short-term borrowing just to keep, operations running at the state level. Obviously, everyone not yet paying their taxes has also decreased revenue, in addition to tax revenue declining from other sources. So I think you're smart about the way you're approaching it, and I think there's potential for a very difficult period of time ahead, but it's too soon yet to understand fully what that may look like.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, the official word that we got 2 days ago from basically the management budget within DEC, where the money flows, is things are slower than usual. And that's about right. So conservative is the word, conservative spending. That probably answers most of your questions? Okay, thanks, Steve. Let me bring up the technical committee report for Neil here so you can take a look. Sorry about that one section getting cut off on us here. Okay. Neil, are you there?
Yes. Didn't know if I had control or if Wendy had control. There I am. Good morning, everyone.
Good
Can you hear me,
morning.
Chris?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, the updated technical committee report for the last 2 quarters is provided to you. Goes all the way back to our December meeting. As you probably expect, there's nothing particularly new, no new projects that we've had to review, but I did want to highlight a couple of updates on some existing projects you're familiar with that we've talked about in the past. The first of which is in the city of Albany and the landfill habitat restoration project. Given COVID-19 and staff, the issues that's placed on the city and city staffing and other resources, I've heard verbally that they will not be moving sand up to the closed portion of what we call the Greater Albany Landfill, the GAL, probably at all this summer. At this point, it's getting late. There was always an issue with making sure that whenever that sand is moved, there's enough time to get it seeded and stabilized with at least a cover crop. And we're approaching the time period where that's just becoming more and more risky. So what I heard from them is they're not planning on moving any of that sand this year. Staff have had other priorities, and we'll look forward to working with them to initiate restoration of the landfill next year. Applied Ecological Services has continued with Clough Harbor and Associates, the city's contractors, on basically routine maintenance of both the nursery and the habitat restoration that they've completed around the landfill itself. And that's going really well. All their faunal surveys and vegetation surveys. The other big project, of course, that everyone has probably heard about is the combined pyramid project. The town of Guilderland did accept the DEIS as complete and held a public hearing on that, and the date of which I believe was, it's in the report. I don't have it on top of my head. But the planning board held the public hearing online. On May 13th online, and they did have over 300 people comment on that project. A lot of positive comments for the project, in addition to the comments you would expect on the DEIS. Our conclusion, as summarized in the report, is that depending on the dedicated offsets that the applicant and the town have discussed, and in particular, whatever traffic mitigation measure they ultimately decide on, the project in its current state does not, in particular for the apartment buildings next to cross gates, does not appear to result in significant negative impacts on the commission's ability to create and manage the viable preserve. Obviously, that's not to say there aren't any impacts at all, but from the perspective of from the commission's perspective, from our perspective about being able to protect and manage the preserve, it doesn't seem like that project in the end is going to have a real significant impact on what we do. But again, that's contingent upon not just the mitigation, but also they're still looking at ways of mitigating traffic on Rapp Road. And there are a number of options that were discussed in the DEIS. And depending on what they choose, the impacts could be more or less than what we've commented on so far. So that project it appears to be moving forward. The third project I wanted to highlight is 300 Prout Lane. And Prout Lane is also in Guilderland. And this is an example of a relatively small project that has the potential to have impacts, but the applicant has simply proposed a minor subdivision for a 42-acre lot recommended for full protection, which I fully anticipate if the planning board did not approve it on their June 10th meeting, they probably will be soon. And we see, minor subdivisions happen all the time. But I thought it was interesting because in summary, the report between the landfill, the pyramid projects, and the Prout Lane project, it really summarizes. You have two examples of relatively big projects, the landfill and pyramid, where the impacts have been largely offset or proposed to be largely offset. And contrast that with a relatively small project like a minor subdivision in a full protection area that could potentially eliminate that full protection area from being protected in the future. So small projects can have big impacts, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And big projects can be offset and mitigated in a way that reduces their impact. And I think we have a long history of working with all three municipalities to try and balance all of that. But it was an interesting juxtaposition in the report. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any, and you have the report. And if something comes up later on, you feel free to email Chris or I, and I'd be happy to try and fill in any blanks that I left. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions for Neil? Okay.
I guess next is Lisa Anthony with the financial report.
I'll bring that up for us here. Okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hey, does everybody like that cowboy look that Keith has?
It's very practical.
Yes.
It's very practical, John, because this way I can't forget my mask when I get out of my workspace. If I have some time to kill, I can go rob a bank. So it's got multi-use.
It's great to see everybody, even though it's on video.
Oh, look at you bragging again about that fish. How many times are we going to look at that picture?
Hey, you gotta have some fun during this, you know? Well, welcome. I'm going to go through the statement of financial activities for April. It's just 1 month of our fiscal year. It's very minimal. So I'll start with revenue. Dues and contributions are 0. And this is a quarterly number that you will see based on our Trusco donations. This will come in June, September, December, and March. Government contracts are a little bit less than budgeted, just due to conservative spending, like Chris mentioned. Mitigation fees are 0 for April. Again, this will be a quarterly expense. June, September, December, and March. Lease revenue is on budget for the year, and other revenue is $2,000 lower than budget. This is due to the closure of our DC center. This is our merchandise and clothing sales, as well as our program fees. So total revenue came in at 97% of budget through April. On the expense side, personnel and fringe, these numbers are kind of boring. They're all pretty much on budget. Personnel and fringe are 97% of budget. Travel is 110% of budget. And this is preserved travel and mileage. We're allowed 1 person per vehicle, so we'll see a little bit more in this and a little bit less in travel to other places. Contractual is on budget. Communications is on budget. Utilities are on budget for now. They're running a little bit lower due to the center being closed. Supplies and equipment are on budget, and other expenses are 98% of budget. So overall, both revenue and expenses came in at 97% of budget, giving us an operating income of $3,200. Any questions on that?
Could you repeat the last sentence? The very last few words, I didn't get it.
Our net operating income,
Yeah, just the very last sentence.
32.
You are on budget, 97% of budget, and then
Expenses, yep, expenses and revenue. We're both 97% of budget. Giving us an yep, okay. Moving on to statement of net assets. Cash and cash equivalents decreased, and this is due to our monthly expenditures. Grants receivable increased. This is due to the money owed from our DC grant for the month of April. Accounts receivable decreased slightly, just due to a payment for some outstanding invoices. Inventory remained the same. Prepaid expenses decreased. This is just due to the timing of year-end expenses for April. Investments increased $296,000, and this is due to a positive performance in all 4 funds. Capital assets decreased $22,000. This is due to monthly depreciation on our fixed assets. Land remained the same, and deferred outflows remained the same, and this is from New York State Retirement. Onto liabilities. Accounts payable and accrued expenses decreased. This is due to accrued expenses being paid in April. Deferred revenue remained the same. New York pension liability remained the same, and OPEB liability remained the same, giving us a decrease in liability of $6,000. Net assets invested in capital assets decreased $22,000 due to depreciation expense. Reserved assets remained the same, and unreserved assets increased $300,000, giving us a total increase of net assets of $277,000. This is due to $296,000 in investment income, $22,000 in depreciation expense, and $3,000 net income. Any questions on that? No? All right. Moving on to investments. For the month of April, we had a very good month. All 4 funds came in positive. The Reserve Fund, 1.87%. Discovery Center, 5.82%. Endowment increased 6.18%, and OPEB money market increased 1.82%, giving us a total gain on investments of $296,000. Any questions on that? Thanks, guys. Great to see you all.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the presentations portion of the meeting, and first up will be KeyBank to give us an annual report on the investments.
No.
Is KeyBank on?
Yep, Brian's with us. Hi, Brian. Can you unmute him? Brian Hughes. There you are.
Hi.
Control over everybody here.
I think I'm unmuted now.
You are.
Okay.
Susan's unmuted too if she needed to speak.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hi,
Go ahead,
Susan.
Brian.
Sure.
Hi, Brian.
So I was going to cover the presentation materials that Chris had emailed out to everybody earlier. And I was going to start on tab 1, page 1. So these numbers are as of the end of April. We've since had some updates, which I'll provide you as well. But as of the end of April, you can see the total balance in the Endowment Foundation account was $3.5 million. As of the end of May, it is roughly a little over $3.6 million with the gains that we experienced this month. Asset allocation is, as of this time, you can see it was roughly, 7.5% cash, 46.5% equity, and, a little over 45.5% fixed income. Pretty much the same mix of assets as of the end of May. It's 47% equities, 47% fixed income, and 6% cash. This, on average, is a balanced objective, which means it should be about 50% equities, 50% fixed income, but it gives you an idea of kind of how we're, KeyBank is seeing the world and thinking about the markets, across the board. We're tending to under-allocate our equity exposure right now, taking it a little bit below the targeted amount just to be conservative in these uncertain times. Next, I was going to go to tab 1, page 3. And this gives you a little bit deeper, more granular look into the portfolio. And here again, really the reason I wanted to highlight this is, again, it gives you a furthering idea of our thinking. So not only are we, in the top line, you can see benchmark allocation 50%, portfolio allocation roughly 46.5%, now 47% equities. But not only are we underweighting equities, but if you look at the mix of assets underneath versus the benchmarks, you can see that we're overweight US large cap, and really kind of taking a little bit away from mid cap, small cap, and international developed. And this is kind of another way we're just kind of further being conservative in our clients' portfolios at this time. And moving on to tab 1, page 7, you can see it's really kind of played out well in terms of portfolio performance. And on tab 1, page 7, you can see year-to-date performance in the endowment portfolio, albeit at this time it was down 4.5%. You can see the blended benchmark was down 4.7%, so about 20 basis points of outperformance. And 1 year trailing return of 2.27% versus benchmark of 1.89%. So again, that's a little over 30 basis points of outperformance right there, actually almost 40 basis points. Next, I was going to go to tab 2, which is the reserve portfolio, and tab 2, page 1. And this, again, being the reserve portfolio is invested differently. It's 100% cash and fixed income. You can see at the end of April, the total balance was, $3,964,000. As of the end of May, it's a little over $4 million balance with movements of market and also collection of some interest payments. And you can see the asset allocation at this time, it was, roughly 8% cash and 92% fixed income. And as of the end of May, it's 95% fixed income investments, 5% cash. And moving on to tab 2, page 6, you can see performance-wise, year to date, the portfolio is up 3.3% through the end of April versus the blended benchmark of 3.7%. And year over year, up 7.89% versus the blended benchmark of 7.99%. The reason for the slight underperformance in this portfolio is that we had kept duration. So the average maturity in our portfolio that we're managing for you is slightly shorter than the Barclays intermediate duration portfolio, which we're using as a benchmark for your portfolio. And with the dramatic movement in interest rates down, it caused some slight underperformance. Part of the reason for us kind of being a little bit shorter in duration is just the overall lower rate environment we're in, and in terms of what you get, in terms of extra yield for going out the yield curve a bit or buying a little bit longer maturity investments is not a heck of a lot. So, in most of our clients' portfolios, we're tending to stay a little bit shorter duration than, what the benchmark is.
Good.
Tab 3, page 1 is a look at the Discovery Center portfolio. And this is very similar to the endowment portfolio with the exception of the size of it. Balanced objective. As of the end of April, a total balance of roughly $115,000. Through the end of May, it is $118,000 balance. As of the end of April, almost 8% cash, 45.5% equities, and roughly 47% fixed income. Through the end of May, very similar allocation to the endowment portfolio, 47% equities, 47% fixed income, and 6% cash.
Okay.
Tab 3, page 3. Again, very similar story to the endowment portfolio in terms of how we're positioned: overweight US large cap, underweight mid cap, small cap, and international developed markets. And one of the main differences in terms of this portfolio and the endowment is, again, due to size. And in the endowment portfolio, we're able, just because of scaling, to make use of our core equity strategy on the large cap side, which is a mix of single name stock positions benchmarked to the S&P 500 that I manage locally, but work on in conjunction with our team in Cleveland that provides the research and recommendations in terms of the portfolio. And again, just because of the smaller size of this portfolio, on the Discovery Center side, we have to make use of exchange traded funds and mutual funds to get that large cap exposure. And on tab 3, page 6, that's the reason for a little bit of a difference in the performance of this portfolio versus the endowment portfolio. So you can see year to date, this portfolio is down 5.1% versus a benchmark return of 4.7%, and 1 year return 1.29% versus a benchmark return of 1.9%, and 3 year return 4.95% versus a benchmark return of 4.89%. And finally, in tab 4, page 1, I'll cover the OPEB account, the other post-employment benefit account that we just established for you last year. As of the end of April, had a balance of $640,000 or $642,500 roughly, with a breakout of roughly 8% cash, 92% fixed income, maximum income objective. So again, this is 100% fixed income and cash portfolio. And as of the end of May, this portfolio is roughly $650,000 in balance, and 95% fixed income, 5% cash. And in terms of performance, slightly different story than, and this is tab 3, page 6, slightly different story than the reserve account. And this is mainly due to the timing of the cash flows in the account and contributions made to the account this year versus, the reserve account, which didn't have cash contributions that we had to work in at a lower, during the lower rate environment. But you can see year-to-date return of 1.3% versus blended benchmark, again, of the intermediate duration portfolio of 3.7%. And that was really wraps up my my investment presentation. I didn't know. I'll open the floor to questions if there are any.
Can I just ask a quick question? You said that last part, a 1.3% return for the year. And what did you say right after that?
The blended benchmark return is 3.74%. So again, that's the same benchmark that we use in the reserve portfolio, which is in tab 2.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Brian.
Absolutely.
I meant to say at the beginning of Brian's presentation, Brian did this presentation for the Audit Committee last week, as well as Frank, who we're going to hear from Wojcicki. Frank went over the draft audit for the Audit Committee last week. And I was going to say we can't share the financials on the screen, so that's why I did. Anybody have any questions for Brian? Nope. Brian, thank you. Susan, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear from Frank Ferrucci, who will report on the annual audit. Frank from Wojcicki and Company. Frank, the floor is yours.
Frank, and I'll put it up on the screen.
Okay.
Do you want the letter up too?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the letter.
Okay. Bear with me. There we go.
Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So again, my name is Frank Ferrucci, partner at Wojcicki and Company. We conduct your audit on an annual basis, and the two reports that you have in front of you are the byproduct of our audit as of March 31st, 2020. First report is our report to the Board of Directors. It's required audit communication that really summarizes any and all significant audit findings that we're required to communicate to those charged with governance. On the beginning of that, under qualitative aspects of accounting practices, it's important for the board to know that management is ultimately responsible for the selection and use of appropriate accounting policies, and the significant policies used by the commissioner described in Note A. Really, the financial statements belong to management. The only pages in that report that belong to Wojcicki and Company are our independent auditor's report, and then we have a report on compliance in the back related to governmental auditing standards. No new accounting policies were adopted, and all policies were consistently applied year over year. So you have comparative financial statements, which I'll go over in a little bit. No changes from an accounting standards standpoint. Estimates are an integral part of the financial statements, and you have three, I'll call rather large estimates that we have here in this report. First would be the fair value of your investment portfolio, which is obtained from quoted market prices, and they're obtained from third-party services, basically the custodian of those assets. We do evaluate the key factors and assumptions to determine that they're reasonable. All of your investments are considered level 1 investments, meaning they're quoted market prices that you can find on Yahoo Finance or any other site that provides those prices to the public. There's really no significant assumptions applied in those. The other two estimates that are in the financial statements, rather large, would be the funded status of your pension plan and the funded status or the other post-employment benefit obligation. Both of those are obtained from actuaries, and we obtain those reports, and we look at the assumptions, making sure that they're reasonable in relation to the financial statement as a whole. We had no difficulties or disagreements in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. We also had no corrected or uncorrected misstatements. Those corrected meaning any adjustments to the numbers that Lisa has provided to you, as she just did a little bit while ago, or uncorrected, effectively meaning that we had immaterial differences or potentially a misstatement that doesn't need to be recorded, but we think management and those charged with government should know. So there were none of those. We do require representations from management in order to issue our audit report. That letter was dated June 12th, which is also the date of our audit report. Those representations effectively mean that management's provided us with all documentation that is needed in order for us to issue our audit report. They've answered and responded to all of our inquiries truthfully, and they have not withheld any information that is pertinent to the audit. And finally, on the bottom there, management consultations with other independent accountants. This is similar to obtaining a second opinion. If we had a disagreement or an issue, sometimes that's where these second opinions come into play. We had none, as I mentioned earlier, but it's important for the board to know that if you were to obtain a second opinion on anything, that accountant or that auditor is required to contact us, basically to make sure that they have all the facts and relevant information in order to do that. So they're not just being provided with what's necessary or what management wants them to hear, but they have all the information out there. That is effectively the report to the board. I will move into the financial statements and our compliance report in accordance with government auditing standards. You know, if you're a reader of the financial statements, governmental auditing standards require management's discussion and analysis, which is on the first 4 pages of the financial statements. That's a very good overview of the year, almost like cliff notes of these financials. We don't provide an opinion on this MD&A, but it is required supplementary information. We do review it. We make sure that it is not contradictory, but again, no opinion is put on that. Page 5 starts our independent auditors report. And this is really clarified to provide what management's responsibility is versus our responsibility as auditors. As I mentioned, management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with US GAAP. Our responsibility is to express an opinion, and we conduct our audits in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States and those contained within government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. On page 6 is our opinion, and this effectively is an unmodified or clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that we can provide on the Commission's financial statements for both 2020 and 2019. The other matters section of the report just draws the reader to other information that is included in these financial statements. The first bullet point is the required supplementary information, which, as I mentioned before, is the management's discussion and analysis, along with other schedules that are required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board related to your pension and your OPEB liability. The other information section, which we do put an opinion on, that is effectively your compliance with the investment information for New York State. That's on the last page of this report. And as you see in this here, in our opinion, that information is fairly stated in all material respects in relation to the financial statement as a whole. We also have one additional report required by government auditing standards related to compliance, which I will go over in a second, but that paragraph right there brings the reader to that report in those pages. The statements of net position, that's effectively your balance sheet if you were a for-profit entity. And really, the major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved into your investment account. The major changes here you will see is your cash and cash equivalents line. And the really change there is the last year toward the end of 2019, money was taken out of cash and moved 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 out of cash and moved